commitment towards zero deforestation to break the link between deforestation and commodities in their supply chains. We've designed the report around a 5-stage supply chain plan, and we're revealing how corporate commitments to cutting deforestation can and are currently being translated into action. The business case for removing deforestation from supply chains is increasingly understood. 75% of companies report that they see at least one supply chain risk associated with forest risk commodities that could have the potential to generate substantive changes to their business operations, revenue, or expenditure. Indeed, 70% of companies disclosing to CDP have some form of commitment in place to address deforestation and degradation. But really the question on everyone's mind is, how are these commitments, these high-level commitments, being implemented? And how are they particularly being implemented in the supply chains of these large global companies? So the data that we're releasing today shows that there is a gap between the commitments and the actions to meet them. Particularly this implementation gap with the supply chain is around getting material that is being specified in these high-level commitments into their supply chains. For example, half of the companies that have commitments to source certified soy, for example, are yet to get any into their supply chains. And for palm oil, this is the case for around a quarter of them. And part of the gap that we've identified in translating these commitments is in translating them into clear requirements for buyers and suppliers to take to the marketplace. For example, while 85% of manufacturers and retailers with a procurement standard report to factor compliance into their supplier selection, only 65% across commodities of those with a procurement standard say that this impacts their supplier engagement program, and only just over a quarter provide suppliers with training and/or workshops on this issue. What is really clear is that companies need to bring their supply chains with them on this journey. The companies on the panel can tell you much more about how they're bringing their supply chains along. But I wanted to reiterate that supplier capacity building is key to overcome the challenges of implementation and realize low-carbon supply chains. Companies that are engaging across their value chain are more likely to succeed on their targets. This is something that CDP has shown clearly through its supply chain program, where companies doing this are more likely to achieve emissions reductions. The 5-point supply chain plan that we've launched today in our report sets out an approach for buyers to ensure that a deforestation commitment is met. And this really includes enhancing the procurement process, communicating those expectations both to their buyers and suppliers, tracking progress transparently, collaborating to drive progress, and finally reviewing, revisiting, and rewarding results. I would like to turn to the panel now to be able to outline their approach to implementing the commitments and explore some of the themes that we have from the 5-stage supply chain plan in the report. So if I may, I'd like to come to Bertrand first, and I'd like to ask Bertrand to firstly outline Carrefour's approach to zero deforestation, but to particularly tell us how you communicate your expectations to your procurement team and suppliers in order to implement your zero deforestation commitment.
Okay, thank you very much, and also thank you for organizing this type of event, because we do not have so many opportunities to explain what we are doing against deforestation. First, perhaps I would like to start in explaining, in telling you some few words on why we are committed against deforestation. The first point, it's we feel already the lack of water in our supply chain. We feel already, for example, in our banana supply chain, we feel a lot of earthquake, a lot of troubles in our supply chain. So today it's the reality. So we have to do something. So that's why, in fact, we believe that the scarcity of natural resources, we have to do something. And in Carrefour, we decided to launch a program with 2 pillars. The first pillar is to reduce wastage of food, essentially. And as you know, 1/3 of the food produced on the planet is not consumed. And it makes sense to reduce wastage and to avoid deforestation, for example. And our second pillar is to protect biodiversity. And our commitment to avoid deforestation in 2020 makes sense to protect biodiversity. I think on the subject of zero net deforestation, we need to act collectively. That's why we are committed with Consumer Goods Forum and with some of our suppliers. We are 400 members in Consumer Goods Forum, and we took the same commitment. The most important thing, if you really want to avoid deforestation, you must act collectively, and it's not a matter of competition. That is the most important point. It's not marketing. It's not a way to create differentiation. That is the most important thing. That's why in CGF, and I know CGF is in the room, that's why we are working together. That's why we are trying to find a solution together. It's the first point. And the second point, we must be really humble. We must be really humble. Because in fact, deforestation, when you try to find a solution, for example, when the solution we found with one of our suppliers in Brazil, you understand with Greenpeace and with all the NGO that you still have some fire, you still have some trouble in another area. So that's why you need to be humble, you need to work step by step, and you need to find some solution. So if I really want to answer to your question, because I didn't answer yet, how you can embark all your buyers in these commitments, it must make sense. It must make sense in your country. And also, I believe that we do not have to pay more for a non-GMO, for example, for a soy without GMO, or for a soy without GMO without deforestation. For example, we start 12 years ago, we started to source a soy without GMO in Carrefour for all our European markets, but also in Brazil. 12 years. We start to pay a premium of €5 per ton to import the soy. And today we pay €80 per ton to import the soy. In fact, the premium increased because we accept this premium. So I believe that a premium is useful, but it must be not linked only on the certified soy, it must be linked on the total amount of soy produced in Brazil. Because if you divide your premium by all the amount of soy, you will decrease the price of this premium. I don't know if I'm clear or not. No? For example, if certification costs, you include the certification, it costs only on certified commodities. In fact, the commodities the price is higher. But if you include the price of certification for all the amount of commodities, you are starting to have to reduce the price of certification. And for our buyer and for our company, it makes sense. And if you really want to change things and to avoid deforestation, you need to work on that.
Thank you very much, Bertrand. I'm going to come to you now, Ida. And thank you very much. I think this is your 4th session back-to-back, so I really appreciate you still being with us. Can I ask you just to briefly outline Asia Pulp and Paper's approach on zero deforestation, but particularly to tell us how you're collaborating to drive progress at the landscape level, being that we're at the GLF, at the landscape level, to meet your deforestation commitment?
Thank you, Kathy. So probably some of you don't know me. I run sustainability at Asia Pulp and Paper Group. Asia Pulp and Paper Group is one of the largest pulp and paper producer in the world, and we do have forest and plantation in our supply chain, and we are committed to no deforestation or a deforestation-free supply chain since February 2013, so it's almost 3 years now. And on top of that, we also committed to the implementation of a landscape approach, because we understand that we cannot implement the deforestation-free supply chain alone in our landscape. So we have to actually also, in order to protect the forest, we also need to implement a landscape approach to protect the wider landscape of the forest. The commitment to deforestation-free supply chain is basically embedded in our forest conservation policy. They are consisting of few things. Number one is no plantation development on natural forest area as defined by high conservation value and high carbon stock assessments. And number 2 is reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, among others, is by through forested peatland protection. And number 3 is respect for local rights, the adoption of free, informed, and prior consent to protect indigenous and local communities' rights, and also the resolutions of social conflicts across all supply chain. And number 4, of course, is transparency. Our forest conservation policy implementation is monitored by all stakeholders involved in the implementation of the policies, independent partners, also the wider NGO community. And the last is the supplier involvement, implementation of responsible fiber procurement and purchasing policy to ensure all suppliers support responsible forest management. This is the reason for making these changes very well known to anyone who has followed the history of my company over the past decade. It was the culmination of much internal reflection and external engagement. We took this approach not only to support the sustainability of the environment, but also the future of our business. Responsible management of our pulpwood suppliers for us will ensure sustainable supply of plantation wood for our paper production. Indeed, our business, our plantation forest, depends on healthy forest ecosystem. But like I said before, our plantations concessions are not operating independently or isolatedly, so or isolated from other stakeholders. That's why for almost 2 years now, we have been implementing landscape approach and working together with other concession holders, other actors in the landscapes, other NGOs to implement a multi-stakeholder initiative to protect the landscape depending on what is being prioritized in the landscape. For example, we have embarked on the protection of peatland in the last couple of years, and also the last couple of months we are engaged in the rewetting or hydrating peatland management. But for protection of peatland, it's peat landscape doesn't recognize boundaries of concession, so we need to make sure the other actors in the landscape also do similar things to help protect the landscape as a whole. I think that's what I could say, Kathy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ada. And Kevin, maybe a similar question to you. I mean, I'd love to hear how Mars's approach on zero deforestation or deforestation-free commodities, but particularly how your company is collaborating to drive progress with your suppliers in able to provide you with the material that you specify in that commitment.
Great, thank you. The great thing about being the last panelist is you get more time to prepare. The problem is the temptation to rewrite all your remarks as you're inspired by the things that people on either side of you say. So maybe to go back to sort of the opening question that you asked the larger group was why deforestation, why it's a focus, why it's a priority for us. So we have an approach focused on the impacts of our supply chain, and in the environmental space we put those into 3 buckets: greenhouse gases, land, and water. And we're trying to chase what the science says we should be chasing in all those areas. And the powerful thing about deforestation, not as an impact in of itself, but as a strategy to eliminate deforestation, is you make progress against all 3 of those metrics, right? So you reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, you improve water retention in watersheds, and you help prevent soil loss in watersheds. So it's a great strategy for solving multiple issues at once. So that makes it appealing for us, not just from a risk management and doing the right thing, but actually helping tackle some of the issues that we want. In terms of deforestation specifically, and I think some of the numbers are in the report of, deforestation is somewhere between 12 and 15%. You see different numbers of global GHG emissions, which is obviously a huge impact, but also creates a huge opportunity, because it means by solving, if you can solve that one problem, however big it is, it's one problem, you can make a big dent in the numbers that we need to achieve. In terms of the approach we're taking, I think Bertrand made a very good point about one of the values of, for example, the CGF commitment and CDP asking for sort of standardized reporting in this space is, supply chains are vast, complicated, intricate things. There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of moving players. It's not really a chain, it's a web, right? There's a lot of things going on. If everybody in that web is asking for slightly different things in slightly different ways, it makes it even harder to get clear signals to the start of all those chains or webs where deforestation is actually occurring. If everybody throughout that chain is singing the same song and asking for the same things and measuring it in the same way, then you have a much better chance of getting a signal that makes its way through that complicated web and helps drive some clear action on the ground. And obviously, you know, there's a lot of economic supply chain transactions that happen between, for example, retailers and manufacturers, where if we can change our relationship in such a way that we're motivated to chase after the same things and get recognized and ideally rewarded for having you know, deforestation-free supply chains from our customers, that helps us go faster and that helps us pass the signal down the chain. In terms of your specific question of what we're doing with suppliers, really what we've done in the areas of deforestation, and we have commitments around palm, beef, soy, and pulp and paper relative to deforestation. What we've started with is much deeper engagement with our suppliers. So we've transitioned from more of a model where we were sort of just working the market and using what was available from different suppliers and making sure the product delivered against our spec, and realizing that what we really needed to transition to was deeper engagement with the suppliers and you know, asking more questions and going further in to understand the risks and then to take action around traceability or certification, you know, whatever the right approach is for that particular supply chain. The opportunity that comes out of that is, as you learn more about a system, you have more opportunities to identify inefficiencies and other ways you can improve the system. So as we start to understand what drives our suppliers' business models more deeply, we start to realize, oh, maybe there's different ways we can talk about working with each other that generate an economic efficiency completely separate from deforestation that helps mitigate some of the costs that might be associated. So it's an interesting transition, not just in chasing deforestation, but in using that as a lever to change the nature of the relationship at a commercial level between, you know, in our case, manufacturers and suppliers, or retailers and manufacturers. We've actually got retailer, manufacturer, supplier. So
that wasn't unintentional, but thank you very much, Kevin. I'd like to open it out for questions to the floor now, because I'd like a good discussion. So I hope that you've all been prepping your questions. Can I ask, we have a roaming microphone. Roberta in the front here has a roaming microphone. Can I ask that you keep your questions snappy and short, so we can get through as many as possible, because I know that you've all got questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please could you raise your hand? And when you ask a question, could you please identify your name, affiliation, and then state your question? Don't be shy. Gentleman at the back. I'll take a round of 2 or 3. So if anyone else has a question, let me know after.
Hi, my name is Christian Dannecker. I work at Southport Group in supply chains and land use. And my question is, if you work with your suppliers, what is the focus? What is the key issue? Is it capacity of them? Is it training them to pass certifications later on? Is it working with them on efficiency gains, or is it something else? Thanks.
Is that a question for any particular panelist or all of them, Christian?
It's probably for Mr. Mars.
For Kevin.
Don't I wish I was Mr. Mars? Yeah. Oh, very good. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think the answer is it varies a little bit by supply chain and supplier in terms of what the opportunity is. You know, I think the challenge is to, as I sort of alluded to figure out how to make working on deforestation a collaborative effort and not just another line in the specification, which is then an invitation to another line on the purchase order, right? You know, because that's not, I mean, you can do that, and that might get you there, but that's not the most constructive way of getting into it. So I think the specifics vary. I mean, we have some suppliers who are very active and engaged, and you know, we come and ask the question, and they're ecstatic. We have other suppliers who are a little less clear what we're actually asking when we show up, and you know, so that's a different journey. So it's very sort of situation and material specific.
Perhaps I would like to also answer. In fact, we ask for certification when it exists for paper, for example, paper, cardboard, and packaging. We ask for certification, and we also ask our supplier to collaborate with NGOs. I think the main point, we are not expert at all. We are retailer, we are not experts. So we ask them to work with NGO, with big NGO or small NGO, and we ask them to create some working group. And we ask the working group to give us advice and answers and all that. Because as you know, you cannot be expert in every commodities. So I think the best point is to think that NGO together they can have one answer, and we are waiting for this type of answer, and we are encouraging our supplier to organize this type of working group together, as APP did.
Ida, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a little bit. The discussion is about no deforestation. So if you ask what is it that we should prioritize, then we should prioritize what is the most critical issue that we need to address. I mean, for myself, the most critical issue that we needed to address was to stop deforestation. So before we talk about certifications or compliance or audit, whatever, we need to make sure that our suppliers comply with the halting deforestation. So we need to have a look at what are the critical issues and focus on the most critical issues first.
Thank you. Any further questions from the floor, please? Okay, so we'll have the gentleman at the front, and the lady there in the middle with the brown, and the gentleman at the back waving at me. We'll take those three first. We'll take them at once, and then we'll answer afterwards. Okay.
James Hulse from CDP. I wanted to ask all the panelists, how do you communicate the business case internally for zero deforestation, given that most cases it's an additional upfront cost?
Great. And in the middle there?
Claire Raisin from Size of Wales NGO. My question very much leads on from the first question from the floor, and it's really about are there any particular areas in the supply chain that are challenging? Because I would have thought different scales of producers, whether they're small scale or large scale, would have different challenges to deal with, and I wondered how that impacted the way that you work with them and the way that they report with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and it was the gentleman at the back near the door. If you stick up your hand again, I think Roberta can find you.
Nice meeting you. My name is Denis Ruskart. I'm a researcher, but I work a lot in Indonesia. And as you may know, one of the main issues in Indonesia is being this establishment of forest states because of the idea of creating a state and then giving to palm oil companies and giving after to also pulp and paper companies. And it was at the expense of local rights. Then basically one of the key issues is that we think that as Indonesia as a one state, but in fact it's a quite new state, and with a lot, let's say 700 different languages. And the idea is that how do you really do or help support local community rights would be key to stop deforestation. Then can you work on that level or not?
Thanks very much for all your questions. So first to the business case. Could I ask each of you to make a brief comment on the question on the business case for tackling this issue?
In fact, I already tried to answer, but I don't know if I have been clear or not. But I'm trying always to use the example of GMO soy. Because with GMO soy, I think we did a mistake. We did the first mistake, we tried to do it ourselves and to be the only one to do it. And we tried to say, okay, Carrefour, we do not want GMO, so we do not want to feed our animal with soy containing GMO. So and we wanted to be different with that. It was our mistake, in fact. What we had to do, and what you know now, we have to be collaborative, we have to be collective, and we are the only one to import soy without GMO today in Europe. So after 10 years, so you see what I mean? So if today every retailer in Europe are committed against GMO and against deforestation, it will be much easier. So I think that what we have to do, we have to explain to our buyer. And for example, we launched yesterday, we launched a new product with soy produced in France. And we can explain that to our buyer, and it makes sense for everyone.
Yeah, so I think on the business case, I mean, it's a fair challenge, right? And I think, in general, a lot of sustainability is about caring about what usually get called externalities, which by definition are things that you're not paying for today, and it's sort of bringing them inside and making them something you worry about. There are parts of that cost that you can make go away completely. So for example, when part of it is around certification and tracking and segregating and isolating, well, when you get to the point where the majority of the market is the good stuff, whatever the good stuff is, then that tracking cost goes away because it becomes easier to track the bad stuff. So that's one where you solve for that problem by getting to scale as fast as you can. You know, there are other costs which are maybe harder to make go away. And that's where, again, I think the important dialogue to have with suppliers is not just to push it across the table as another requirement, but to say, well, you know, this is what we want to do. And then you have to have the conversation to explore, is there a way to take the sort of deeper discussion you're going to have around that and find an opportunity? Sometimes successful, sometimes not.
Great, thank you. Ida, anything you want to say on the business case?
How to communicate the business case internally? Really, really hard. That's my answer.
Short and snappy. I like it.
No, just seriously. No deforestation is a business case that we do not have the model yet. Well, we did not have the model yet. We're half through that. We didn't have the blueprint. We didn't have the roadmap. So we just have to believe in the values. Yes, of course, we calculated how much area that we need to sacrifice, how much wood that we need to sacrifice, but we also calculate how much market access that we could gain. But was it already written on the stone? No. So we have to believe in the value and believe what we're doing is doing the right thing. And then the fact will speak by itself, and then it's proven. Our market has expanded greatly since we adopted no deforestation policy 3 years ago. So I guess we just have to believe in the values, and we have to believe that without our sustainability values, our business will cease to exist.
Thank you. So on to the question around challenges with any particular part of the supply chain. I mean, supplier could look very different, I expect. You know, a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, smallholders. Any particular challenging parts and what your companies are doing to work with those different types of suppliers?
Yeah, maybe I'll break up the flow by going first instead of making Bertrand take the lead every time. So I think it's sort of actually the second and the third question, and I've sort of a joint answer for the two of them, which is, you know, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is, as I've suggested, is something that is best tackled not by just adding a line to the specification and sending the email, but in having a dialogue, right? And you know, just at a practical level, there's a limit to how many people you could have a dialogue with. So I think the more challenging parts of our supply chain are the parts of our supply chain where, you know, there's either more levels, or at the base of all of those, there are more sources, right? So it's much easier to have a conversation with 4 plantation owners than it is with 10,000 smallholders. You know, you need more infrastructure, you need more on-the-ground expertise, you need more skill of people that generally speaking, at least from where Mars is in the supply chain, they're not going to be Mars people, right? They're going to be our suppliers or the people that our suppliers work with, or maybe a local NGO or development agency. So I think the more people that are involved and the more stages there are, makes it more challenging just because of the number of conversations that it takes to get there. I think sort of related to that, to the question about local communities, you know, I think it's very difficult for a global business like any of ours to be talking about having direct engagement with local communities in all the places where deforestation could be an issue. You know, we have to rely on the ground partnerships, but we have to find a scalable model for doing that, because there's a limit to how many conversations you can have at a time. So you've got to figure out how to set up a chain. And again, back to the comment about the power of common signals. You know, if we're all sending the same signal to that on the ground resource or that local NGO, it's much easier for them. You know, by the time they've had the conversation with Ada and Bertrand, when I show up to have the conversation, they go, yeah, we've heard this story, we understand what you want, we know what to do, very good, off we go.
And perhaps on that third sort of question, just to build on that a little bit, Ida, as working in Indonesia, would you like to comment on the third question, working in Indonesia, the rights of local communities being incredibly important?
Yeah, I think the question number 3, the lady, and the last question is my answer is the same. So the most challenging issue that we've been facing the last 3 years is basically dealing with the community. Social challenge is possibly the most difficult issue that we need to address, because each community, its indigenous group, each conflicts are different. And imagine, I mean, I only have 40 suppliers, about 3 million hectares of suppliers concession. But only that area is only 3 million. I mean, you can imagine if what Bertrand has to deal with. And I have to develop hundreds of action plans to support the local community on what is it that they want to do, whether they want to develop their traditional land into palm oil, or they want to develop their traditional land into rubber. So we have to come up with an action plan that support them to increase their welfare, to support the responsible development without causing deforestation, and that's the headaches. That's the headaches because you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of action plans. So Kevin was totally right. So we rely quite a lot on the ground partners and suppliers and the local NGOs to support us in developing this and implementing this action plan. So free and prior informed consent system is key, and when you're dealing with the supply chain in the developing countries. Secondly, social conflict resolution system and social conflict management system is key in all your supply chain. Without that, there's no way you can resolve any social or community issues. So have that systems in place and make it work and audit it and make sure that you check the programs on the ground from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bertrand, did you want to comment on any of those questions before I take the next round?
Yeah, perhaps I would like to come back on the small supplier. In fact, what we develop in Carrefour, we develop a direct relation with supplier. We call that quality line products. And today we have 22,000, I think, direct relation with supplier. And I think it's a good way it's what we call our agroecologic laboratory. Because of this relation, we can start to innovate in agroecology. As I told you before, our last example, in fact, we develop some pork and also some treat in the south of France with local soy. And it's quite like a contract between the feed producer, our supplier, to provide to our customers some pork with local soy. I think we must be local. We must be local. We have to do it, and we must work on traceability. So I think, sure, we need to have some global commitment to change the market, and it's what we explained together. But we also need to be local because, in fact, we need to give the chance for all the suppliers in the world. And I would like to give another example. We launched last year a banana, organic banana and fair trade. And it was quite like a challenge because it was new on the French market. But what we did, we developed a new demand. And with this new demand, we found some new supplier. And this year, for example, one new supplier in Africa is able to provide this new banana organic and fair trade. So you see, in fact, the landscape is changing very fast. And when you are a retailer, you need to develop concrete relation with supplier in order to change it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take 2 more questions from the floor, and then I'm going to use my moderator's privilege to ask the last one. Gentleman right at the back, and the lady who had the red cardigan on, I think. Yeah, red cardigan.
Hi, Andy Tate from Greenpeace. You all have relatively, in some cases, very strong policies when it comes to tackling deforestation. I'm curious to understand from your different perspectives the areas in which you think you're succeeding in actually delivering on those commitments, and the areas in which you think so far it's not working and more needs to be done.
Hello, Marielle Robson from Soil Association Certification. We do a range of forest and agricultural certifications. I was interested in Kevin's comment about the importance for suppliers to have companies sending the same signals. And it seems at the moment that every company has a different policy on deforestation or on deforestation free. And I wondered whether the panelists could see any kind of collaborative mechanisms which would help see a way through that, whether it's by a common standard or another mechanism.
Great, thank you very much. So to Andy's question on what's working and what's not yet working, I think from the data in the report would suggest that all companies are on a journey on this. So some comments, perhaps if we go to Ida first this time.
Why you give me the most difficult question to me first, and I don't have time to think. Okay, so what's succeeding? I don't think we can actually use ultimate number. Nothing is absolutely succeeding and nothing is completely failing, in my opinion. Succeeding because, well, I mean, look at ourselves, the deforestation by our suppliers stopped for 3 years. But yes, there's still conversion happening by external parties, by local community, local encroachment, but the majority of deforestation in our supply chain stopped. So that's succeeding. Peatland, for example, all our progress to adopt best practice on peatland management to reduce greenhouse gas emission, the process is succeeding. But then when we this year when we have a massive El Nino, I mean a lot of areas that in our supply chain is also being burned. So the process is succeeding, but then we probably not fast enough. So it's very hard for me to say what is succeeding and what is not working because there's no absolute number. Some of them are more succeeding than others, but like I said earlier before, I mean we embark on no deforestation commitment, thanks to you, Andy, without any roadmap in our hand, without any blueprint. So we have to believe in the values and keep moving forward and try to create a new business model. And this business model will be continuously improved while we're implementing the policy.
So maybe I'll start with the last question. Yeah, common signal, absolutely. I mean, I think all credit to both the other member companies as well as sort of the secretariat of CGF on getting to that 2020 deforestation commitment. However, it would have been even better if that commitment had included, and here's how we're going to measure that, right? Because what's happened is sort of, in the 3, 4, 5 years following that, there's been a lot of scrambling around of, well, so we've all said we're going to do this, but how are we going to measure it? And that's led to a little bit of fragmentation of different answers to what is success, which isn't bad, but it's maybe not as efficient as it could have been. So I think maybe that's a learning to take forward to future initiatives like that, where you're going to make a big commitment. It's good to identify how you're going to define success when you make the commitment. In terms of the what's not working, I think broadly speaking, we're happy with the progress that we're making. Again, like I just said, nothing's perfect, but we're on track for our specific commitments. I don't want to take the time to talk through this. You can go on our website and see, but we're making good progress. I think the biggest challenge was in getting going, in figuring out how to start having those more interactive discussions with suppliers and building relationships with. So we work with the Forest Trust on Palm, for example. So getting that going took some work because it was new and it was different. But now that we're into sort of turning the crank and spinning, we're pretty happy with the progress we're making.
The question of success, it's a quick question, and it comes from Greenpeace, sure. And because in fact there is no success in to eliminate deforestation. For example, RSPO, it has been a success 5 years ago, but today it's not enough. We need to go. We need to have some new requirements on RSPO. We need to develop a new standard. So. And I think when we'll develop the new standard, we'll have another standard, and we never see the end. So we do not have to work to reach a success or to reach a target. We have to work to find some solution always, to find new solution always, and to innovate. And we also have to work with Greenpeace, but then with other NGO, just to define each step of a success. I think, for example, in Brazil, we reached the first step. And you still have a lot of stairs to climb, but we reached the first step. And for us, it's very important to divide the success in small success and to reach step by step each part of our policy.
Thank you. So we're coming towards the end now. So I've just wanted to highlight that nearly 90% of the companies that report to us tell us that there is an opportunity in sourcing one or more of these commodities sustainably. And we've heard today about the journey that these companies are on in getting there. I wonder whether you, just to close your closing comments, whether you would be able to tell us and tell the audience if you have one thing that you need in order to accelerate your company on its journey to zero deforestation. If there was one ask that you could make of any particular stakeholder, what would that be? And while you think about that, I'm going to say my thanks. So you have a couple minutes to think about it. I'd like to just say, before I ask you to thank the panel at the end, I'd really like to say thank you to our funders, the UK Department for International Development, our close colleagues, the Global Canopy Programme, who are our advisor on forests and our forest risk commodities, to C4 for the Launchpad opportunity, Marco Albani and the TFA 2020 for the guest contribution in the full report, which I encourage you to download from www.cep.net, or look on Twitter, because I know you've all been on Twitter and you will have picked it up from there. And last but no means least, I'd like to thank the CDP team, particularly Roberta Eiley and Rafael Savant, who have been instrumental in bringing this report together. So, turning to the panel's closing comments, I think I'll start with Kevin.
What have I done to offend you?
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so I think not actually a new answer, I think, relative to the other questions. I think the biggest thing that would help would be a clear, common definition of success. Because what happens is every minute that we spend sort of trying to argue or work out or understand what success looks like and how we could measure it is a minute and a dollar and an hour or a euro, whatever, that wasn't spent fixing the problem. It was spent trying to define what the measure of success is, and that's important, you know, but you want to get to that and then get into execution. So I guess if I had one wish, that would be it.
Great. It's nearly Christmas.
I think I will come back on my position. We need to work together. We need to work together. We need to have some governments. We need to have some regulation. We need to have some standards. We need to share the same trajectory. I think it's the most important thing. And in many countries, we need to have some government courageous to take some position and to help us to reach our targets. It's yes, I think it's a key point.
Perfect. And Ida.
Very, very similar to Bertrand. That's one thing that we probably need. Is definitely more collaboration from stakeholders. In my industry, in pulp and paper industry, we're pretty fragmented. It's mostly paper industry is dominated by the northern countries, North America and Europe. And then we need to drop this competition. If we talk about sustainability, we need to push aside this competitiveness, you know, like trying to compete, try to expand the market and everything else. When we work on sustainability, we must join forces and more collaborations with other companies and other NGO partners who are partnering with these companies. So I guess that's what my wish. If I could have a wish. And this is where CDP and also like CGF and TFA and others can play a very important role in joining and joining forces among these stakeholders.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to my excellent panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.
I fulfill your expectation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to you.
I have to leave. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do that. All right.
I've got a long list of follow-ups to do, so you're very
Kevin, sorry.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Oh no, that's not actually mine. I don't really